The Arm of the Starfish by Madeleine L'Engle, 18. The next day was, in a quiet and unexciting way, everything Adam had hoped the entire summer would be. Polly brought him his breakfast, but was surprisingly reticent. And the only question she asked about the evening before was what he had had to eat. Adam wondered if her father or mother had told her to leave him alone. He did his chores in the laboratory, drank coffee with Mrs. O'Keefe, while the doctor was busy at his desk. Mrs. O'Keefe knew a great deal about her husband's work, and had often assisted him. Before lunch, Polly called for Adam, and he went swimming with all the children. They did not see Macrina, which was only partly a disappointment. Macrina would have made him think about the night before and all its implications, and he wanted a day of simple, straightforward work. In the afternoon, Dr. O'Keefe rode over to the village. Adam was left in charge of the laboratory, happy and uninterrupted. Mrs. O'Keefe brought him tea, but left him alone, and he spent the time deep in concentration on the files. After dinner they sang again, and as Adam's mind had been held during the day by his concentration on his work, so now the music held him, and he relaxed into the singing. When the younger children were in bed, he walked with Polly at the edge of the ocean. Polly had slipped off her sandals on the sea wall and walked silently, teasing her bare toes against the incoming waves, her white cotton dress blown tight against her 2020 body. Not quite 2020 anymore, Adam realized. It wasn't going to be long before Polly would be bursting out of her childhood, as she was already beginning to do out of her dress. As it grew darker, there was a glittering against the dunes, and Polly ran, colt-like, across the sand, crying, "Fireflies!" and tried to catch the small sparkles between her hands. Sometimes I catch them in a jar just to look at for a little while, just to make a small lantern, but I never hold them for very long. I used to think they were tiny stars, but then I found out how cruel they are, and I don't think stars could be cruel, or should be cruel. Fireflies cruel? Adam asked, with tolerant good humor. Oh, you know, Polly said impatiently. Fireflies have been pretty much left out of my education. All I know is that they're the only source of light that provides illumination with incandescence. So far, so good. Polly held her cupped hands out to him, and a small, startled spark flew out and up. She put her hand in Adam's and pulled him down into the dune. Let's sit for a while. Adam leaned back against the soft, warm sand. How different this was from the night before with Kali. He sighed with relief at the release from tension. Ahead of them, the moon was rising. Above, fireflies glittered. It's really fantastic, he said lazily, looking at one small moving spark. Every light man can make is mostly heat. I forget the proportion it is in an electric bulb, but something like 95% of the energy needed to make an ordinary light bulb for an ordinary lamp in an ordinary house is used up in heat. If we could find how fireflies do it, cold light, electricity would cost only a fraction of what it does now. It would be so cheap it would hardly cost anything. Polly lay back, looking at the sea. The light and power companies wouldn't like that. I think old Doc was working on it for a while. He used to pay me a penny way back when I was a little kid for every 10 fireflies I caught for him in a jelly jar. I spent all evening chasing them. Didn't make much money, but I had an awful lot of fun. Polly rolled over, leaning on one elbow and looking at Adam intensely. Do me a favor and leave fireflies alone. Huh? Adam turned and looked at her. Listen, Polly said, still up on her elbow so that she could stare down at him. Did you know they're divided into different levels or classes? I've told you all I know about fireflies. They don't seem much of a menace to me. Polly did not laugh. She continued to stare at him with a serious, probing expression, so that she looked very much older than her 12 years. Well, they are, and they mate by their flashes. A male firefly will give his flash, maybe 4 flashes, say, and if a female is in the same class or category that he is, she'll answer back with 4 flashes. But if she's in a class that has 3 flashes, or 2 or 5, she won't answer, unless she's hungry. Then she'll give him back 4 flashes, and when he comes down to her, instead of making love with him, she'll eat him. What a bloodthirsty fiendess, Adam said lightly. That's exactly what I mean. Leave fireflies alone, Adam. She stood up, calling, Race you back to the house. and went streaking across the sand. Sunday morning, the whole family went up to the monolithic stones and sat around the large table while Dr. O'Keefe read morning prayers. Then they rode to the native village, Mrs. O'Keefe carrying Rosie in a canvas sling on her back, Dr. O'Keefe carrying Johnny, and Adam riding with Peggy in front of him on the saddle. He had one arm around the little girl, and she leaned back against him contentedly and slept. Verbius entertained them with a lavish and exotic meal, and Polly and Themis rounded up all the O'Keefe children and the village children for a series of dancing and singing games. Adam, sitting next to the doctor, felt lapped in peace and joy. Friday seemed a long way off. It seemed a long way off during the week of working in the lab with the doctor, of swimming with the children, of singing in the living room in the evening, of coming to feel that this island and this family was his home. He knew that in actuality Friday was moving closer and looming larger with every passing minute, but he kept it out of his mind until Thursday night, when all the children, including Polly, were in bed, and he was sitting in the living room with Dr. and Mrs. O'Keefe. Mrs. O'Keefe was mending a pair of Denny's shorts, but her face had a watchful, waiting look, and as she raised her head, the doctor said, "I've arranged to have the helicopter pick you up in the morning, Adam. You have a hard day ahead of you, and it's a tiring ride by horse over to the hotel." "Whatever you say, sir." Adam's heart began to beat so that he could feel it thumping. "You should get to Lisbon around 10 in the morning. The plane leaves for Gaia at around 6, but you can arrange to miss it. Joshua will fly you back." Adam smiled with pleasure. "Oh, great. Something really good to look forward to." "Now, Adam, there hasn't been time for you to learn any Portuguese, has there? Only a few isolated words and idioms. Here's a small phrase book you may find useful then. This is a good street map of Lisbon, which will help you find your way about it. In the morning, I'll give you the tennis papers. Maria and Jose report that the laboratory has been watched all week. One small paper I carefully dropped inadvertently has disappeared. I hope we are leading them away from any thoughts of Themis into thinking I have been experimenting on one of the horses. Jose has dropped hints of this to the stable boys, and one of the horses has a badly cut hoof. The non-existent experiment is important enough to excite much interest, but what is more, in the long run, it would not work. As for the papers on Themis, we'll try to have them on you for as short a time as possible. Maria has made a concealed pocket for you to carry them in. She has also made a slightly less clever pocket for the phony horse papers. If you are searched, this pocket will be discovered first. You are, of course, aware that you will be followed wherever you go." "Yes, sir, I figured I would be." "Know, too, that someone from the embassy will have an eye on you. I don't think you yourself will be in any danger, although the papers may be." "I won't let anything happen to the papers," Adam said fiercely. "I know, Adam. If I had not come to trust you implicitly, I could not allow you to go." Adam remembered that until the promise was lifted, he could not tell Dr. O'Keefe about Collie, bowed his head. "Adam will be all right," Mrs. O'Keefe said softly. Adam looked over at her with gratitude. Dr. O'Keefe continued, his voice quiet, calm, but continuing absolute authority. "The first thing you must do when you get to Lisbon is to call Father Tallis. You will be most private in a public phone booth. Now, Adam, you have already learned that it is the unexpected that usually happens." Adam controlled a shiver that threatened to ripple through his body. "Yes, Dr. O'Keefe, I have. We've tried to prepare as much as possible for the unexpected, to foresee the unforeseen. I think you're right in your suspicions about Dr. Ball and Typhon Cutter. And the other night, I think you're right about your suspicions about Dr. Ball and Typhon Cutter the other night. They're hot on the trail, and you're being used as a decoy. I wish I knew what move they're going to make, but I don't. I can only guess that they'll try to keep you from getting in touch with either Joshua or Father, and certainly they'd prevent you from getting through to the ambassador, and the tennis papers are too important to go to anybody else. So So to try to prepare you for the unpreparable, we have worked out alternate times and places for you to call Tom Tallis. I'm only grateful that he is able to be in Lisbon instead of Gibraltar or heaven and the bishop nowhere else. Sir, Adam asked, how did Canon Tallis get involved in this kind of business? Inadvertently and unwillingly, like most of us, Adam nodded. Yes, how am I to get in touch with him? He will be moving all day Friday. I cannot give you a list of where he would be because it would be too dangerous for you to carry. You'll have to memorize the places he'll be available at each particular hour. The phone numbers will be no trouble since they'll be in each case numbers you can look up in the public phone book. Ready? Until 10:30, the Russian embassy. Adam looked startled, but Mrs. O'Keefe smiled serenely, and Dr. O'Keefe continued. You must try to get him there because we want the papers off you as soon as possible. Ask for Dr. Fedotov. Don't speak to anybody else. How will I be sure? He will identify himself to you through the Frost poem since it's the only one of the passcodes you know. What about the Tallis Canon? That's more a trademark than a code. Dr. Fedotov will put you through to Canon Tallis. If all goes well, and there's no reason it shouldn't, you'll be able to give him the papers before you go to the rectory to Dr. Ball. But if anything should happen to prevent your calling or getting to him, after 10:30 you'll be out of touch until 11. It does take time to get from one place to another. And between 11 and 12 you can call the monastery of Sao San Chrysostom. Ask for the Senor Parroco, Father Enriquez. The Senor Parroco, Father Enriquez. Adam murmured, memorizing. If by noon you still haven't been able to talk to Tom, you'll have time at the restaurant when you go to meet Callie between 1 and 2:30. Call Rabbi Pinnis. Look at the phone book under the name of Senora Leonora Afonso. Got it? Yes. If you haven't been able to phone by 2:30, and you should be able, Adam, these are just emergency procedures, like the life belts on a plane that you never really expect to use. Then from 3:30 to 5, call Joshua. You have his number, don't you? Yes, in my passports. Whatever happens, don't let anybody get hold of them. I hope long before afternoon you'll be all through with your job, if by any mischance you're not. In the evening, Joshua and Father Tallis are going to the opera. If you have to call them, ask for Dr. Megalheis and say it is an emergency. Tom Tallis will have left that name and will say that he may get a call. I repeat, Adam, this should be an unnecessary precaution. Now I'll go over the list again. Adam listened carefully. Mrs. O'Keefe finished patching Denny's shorts and reached for a sweater of Peggy's. Polly's growing out of everything, she murmured. I'll have to go into Lisbon myself soon. Got it? Dr. O'Keefe asked Adam. I think so, Adam said. Until 10:30, Dr. Fedotov at the Russian embassy. Between 11 and 12, Father Henriquez at the San Juan Chrysostom Monastery. Between 1 and 2:30, the Rabbi Pinnis in the phone book under the name of Senora Leonora Afonso. From 3:30 to 5, Joshua. In the evening, the Opera House, and ask for Dr. Magalhaes. Good. A friend of Archangelo's will have the plane ready for you and Joshua after the opera. We can't use Arcangelo anymore since Ball saw him with you at the airport. He's now pinpointed as one of our men, so don't try to get in touch with him, whatever happens. He can't help you anymore, and it would only be putting him in jeopardy. Adam gave an involuntary shudder, because he understood now just how grave the danger to Arcangelo could be. For some reason, he remembered the chauffeur, Molech, and the brutality of the huge hand as it sliced against his knee. Arcangelo's a good man, Dr. O'Keefe said, and obviously loyal. We'll miss him badly. Mrs. O'Keefe looked up. Is it safe for him to stay in Lisbon? Safer than to try to leave. Dr. O'Keefe, Adam said, is Rabbi Pinhas the one who was on the plane? Yes. Now, Adam, you'd better get to bed and get a good night's sleep. We'll be waiting for you and Joshua tomorrow night. Yes, sir, Adam said. Good night. Good night, Mrs. O'Keefe. He lay in bed in the small, airy room that had so quickly come to seem like home. A fresh ocean breeze came in the open window. He pulled the blanket up over him, but he was not sleepy. His body was tense and ready to spring, as though he were already in the plane on his way to Lisbon. He ran over in his mind the list of the places he was to call Canon Talus. Then he tried to project his imagination beyond the unknown quantity of the day to the trip back to the island with Joshua, but he could see in his mind's eye only the daytime trip the week before, and Joshua sending the little plane into the great turbulent clouds, his voice rising above the tumult of the elements. Back in the hills, a night bird hooted. Dr. and Mrs. O'Keefe walked past his door on their way to bed. Adam did not look at his watch because he did not want to know how much time had passed. Even if he needed a good night's sleep, if ever he needed a good night's sleep, it was tonight, so that his mind would be clear for whatever might happen the following day in the next room. Charles made a noise in his sleep. Adam wondered if the children would see Macrina when they went swimming, and if Polly would tell Macrina that he was in Lisbon, and if Macrina would care. There was no questioning Macrina's intelligence, but Adam wondered whether or not things mattered to her. How did a fish, even a mammal, show sadness? A crocodile might be supposed to shed tears, if only crocodile tears. But what could Macrina do to show sorrow? As he thought about Macrina, the thoughts got more complicated and more confused. And he was in Gaia, and he was in Woods Hole, and Macrina was sitting at the concierge's desk at the Avenida Palace, and Adam was asleep. Mrs. O'Keefe brought him breakfast in the morning. Our thoughts will be with you all day, Adam, she said. Thank you, I'm glad. Polly knocked and came in. Take care of yourself, for heaven's sake. For heaven's and the future's sake, Adam quoted. For my sake, Polly said. Charles slipped into the room. Just take care of yourself. Polly came running along the corridor, calling for her mother, plummeted into Adam's room, and was barely stopped from leaping up onto the bed and spilling the breakfast tray. When will Adam be back? Tonight, Polly said tightly. Tonight, Charles said, looking at Adam. Mrs. O'Keefe pulled Peggy up into her lap. But late, Charles, very late, long after midnight. They should arrive with the dawn. Charles looked at his mother, at Adam, without speaking, and left the room as quietly as he had entered it. Mrs. O'Keefe put Peggy down. Come along, Paul, Peg. Let's give Adam a few minutes to eat breakfast in peace. The whole family stood on the seawall and waved as he left in the helicopter. It won't be long, Adam thought, before I'm back here and everything will be all right. It was the same silent pilot who had taken him to dinner with the Cutters, and they whirred across the island with the pilot scowling out the windshield, seemingly wishing to avoid even looking at Adam. They circled the hotel, then flew over the pool and tennis court, and down the beach to a small cement landing strip. The taxi plane was there, and Adam was allowed to get on and settle in his seat. Although he was early, there was room for 12 people in the compact cabin, but not much leg room. A pleasant-looking stewardess offered him coffee, but he was suspicious of all stewardesses and not at all sure if anything offered him to drink. He thought he could handle himself and protect the papers in Maria's special pocket as long as he was wide awake and alert, but he did not want to risk a Mickey Finn and somebody searching him between the island and Lisbon, so he smiled politely and said, No thanks, I've just had gallons. Would you care for a magazine? She asked. We have the latest American magazines, Esquire, Mad. No thanks, I've brought some work. And he did have a sheaf of magazines Dr. O'Keefe had given him, some American, some English, some European, in a number of which Dr. O'Keefe had articles. The first magazine he opened, an Australian one, had a lead article by T.S. Didymus, and Adam felt this was somehow a propitious omen. He read the piece by old Doc, smiling affectionately at the old man's individual quirks of phrasing. Then he managed to lose himself in various other articles that caught his interest, grateful for the discipline of concentration that he learned at school. Dr. O'Keefe's writing style was spare and clear, with unexpected, vivid illustrations and a quick sense of humor. How could I ever have thought he wasn't okay, Adam wondered, and then, remembering that his doubts were all seeded before he had met with a scientist, and that if it had not been for the New York fog with which Callie was so grateful, he might not be heading for Lisbon in danger now. But this was purposeless thinking. He shook himself and returned to the magazine, reading until the passengers from the hotel came aboard. A portly, porcine man with a briefcase settled himself beside Adam. The boy kept his nose in the magazine, determined not to be drawn into conversation, no matter how innocent, but the man appeared as averse to chit-chat as Adam opened his briefcase immediately and set to work on a sheaf of papers, only grunting an assent as the stewardess offered him coffee. Adam read, holding his mind at bay. He managed not to think of the hours ahead, but discovered that he was not retaining anything from the articles in which he thought he was engaged. They landed at the small airport from which he and Joshua had taken off, and where he had first met Dr. Ball. A limousine was waiting outside to take the passengers into the center of Lisbon, and Adam found a seat, seeking the portly man as a seat companion, so he would be assured of silence. But the man did not reopen his briefcase. Instead, he turned to Adam, smiled pleasantly, and said, "I'm Donald Green of the Singer Sewing Machine Company. Haven't noticed you around the hotel." Adam did not, in turn, introduce himself. Instead, he said politely, "Well, no, sir, I've been staying there. Is there any... Well, no, sir, I haven't been staying there. Is there any other place to stay on Gaia?" "Oh, yes, sir. Where? Except for the hotel, it seems a jungle as far as I'm concerned." Adam did not know how to get out of this one. "Well, I have a summer job with a scientist who has a laboratory there." He tensed his body and mind for further questioning. But Mr. Green of the Singer Sewing Machine Company seemed satisfied. To Adam's surprise, he asked no more questions, but went into a eulogy on the merits of his machines and how they were changing the entire life of the Iberian Peninsula. "I feel that I'm doing a great service to these people. Tried to get these savages over in the Gaian village interested, but was most rudely turned away," Adam mumbled politely, and Mr. Green of the Singer Sewing Machine Company continued to talk about his experiences until the limousine stopped. "Nice to have met you, sir," Adam said, and strode purposely down the street as though he knew exactly where he was going. He did not. He had no idea. Dr. O'Keefe had given him a street map of Lisbon, and Adam had studied it, but Lisbon is not the simple checkerboard that makes up most of Manhattan. Lisbon is unexpected hills, open squares, closed alleys, a city of twisting, turning, revealing, hiding light, a dark city of mystery and beauty and fascination. And Adam realized he did not know where anything was in Lisbon. If he could find the Ritz, then he thought he could find in one direction the Avenida Palace Hotel, and in the other Joshua's apartment. If he could find the Ritz, he could go in and look at the map again, phone Canon Tallis, and figure out how to get to the rectory. No, he shouldn't go to the Ritz because of Arcangelo. But if he could find the Ritz, then he would be able to find someplace else to look at a map and make his phone call. He stopped a man, saying, "Ritz, por favor?" The man went into a torrent of Portuguese, and Adam simply shook his head. The man spoke slowly and in full volume, but this did not help. Adam grinned foolishly and shook his head again. Then a voice came from behind him. "I show you where go." Adam turned and faced the huge body and coarse face of Molech. And that is the end of chapter 18.